All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Inspired Ones. Look at those fires. Feel free to hit those buttons and share with us the love. Hey, this is Nick Hughes, founder and CEO of Founders Live, and you are in the very first The Inspired Ones incredible series here on Hotline. So excited. All right. So as we get going in this experience, I just want to say that, hey, this is our beta test. We're really excited about bringing this to market. And the Inspired Ones is a show and an experience that we've been working on for quite some time. It goes back a couple years, and now this new format has provided us an opportunity to really bring something amazing to the world. So, with the Inspired Ones, we are at the convergence of entertainment and entrepreneurship to hear up and close and personal stories of inspiration from the world's most innovative entertainers and promising startup founders. Tonight, you're going to hear from a really amazing person, and more importantly, a dear friend of mine, Dave Parker. So excited. But before we get there, I really want to detail out a bit more about the Inspired Ones and what we're embarking on here. As you know, Founders Live, global platform for entrepreneurship and founders and startups around the world. And we do that through inspiration, education, and entertainment. And you'll hear all three of those tonight. But one thing that I've been doing is I've been studying entrepreneurship and creativity on a higher level. All right. And I've noticed a few things. I've noticed that, entrepreneurship is changing. And creativity and entrepreneurship are converging. And, better said, we are seeing blurring of the lines of distinction between various professionals, creators, and industry definers. So this weekly interactive show invites you to join us at the conversion around the magic that happens at the convergence of creativity and entrepreneurship. This 2-hour experience juxtaposes two different sources of inspiration. The world's most accomplished and talented entertainers who have influenced our pop culture and our world today, as well as the stories emerging from highly promising, innovative creators building the future that we will live in. So excited about that. And by peeling away any superficial veneer, the Inspired Ones reveals truly respectful authenticity and how it can move everyday people forward. So join us as we learn, what the big screen, the stadium, the radio is not telling us. So through this, the Inspired Ones journey, we are going to bring on a number of people over time that you probably recognize. But who are these creators, these entrepreneurs, these entertainers and celebrities? Who are they really? They might be popular, but what is it really about them that they want to be known? What is it they're looking to impact the world around? It's not just their play on the field or their face on the screen. So we want to get to know their other sides. What tugs at their heart? How do they want to be remembered? That's what the Inspired Ones is all about. So we're really excited to bring that to the world. We're very excited to be on Hotline and excited to have partnered with Facebook on this. So very excited to do this. So every single Wednesday evening until October, we will be here hanging out in Hotline and hopefully having some amazing guests that you can interact with. So here we go. So excited about it. So excited about it. A few housekeeping items. You'll notice as you're in here in this experience, again, there's the energy buttons. Please, claps, fires, loves, throw those out there. Please share with us. Show us your energy throughout the conversation as Dave and I are having this conversation. But also, we are excited to, the second part of this conversation and this experience is around hearing from early stage entrepreneurs. So we're going to bring on Chad Johnson, who is a recent winner from Founders Live in Minneapolis. He actually comes from Milwaukee, which is cool. And we're going to hear his pitch. We're going to get some feedback time, as well as you as the audience can also ask questions and engage. So through this experience, you'll notice there's questions on on the right side, you can, one, ask your question. Number two, you can upvote a question over there. And then we're going to start bringing in you individuals. So if you've asked the question, we can pull you in the audio and actually have you engage. Ask your question and then engage with Dave and or Chad. So that's how it's going to work. Please use that. Our goal here is to have you be a part of this conversation, not just sitting back. All right. That's what this entire experience is all about. So before we bring on our first guest, I want to share a story. I want to share a story about 10 years ago. Actually, it's about 11 years ago now. It was 2010. And if you know anything about my story, I didn't start in entrepreneurship or in technology. I was actually educated in exercise physiology and was actually, a strength trainer, worked with high level athletes. I was a strength coach and a personal trainer. And then I made a long-term leap into this industry. And in 2010, I started to get into this, the startup community. And I just thought it was time that I wanted to move forward in this and I want to take it seriously. So I submitted to the Founder Institute in Seattle. And I was nervous. I mean, I go back to that point. Like, I didn't know if I was going to get accepted. I didn't know what was going on at all. And I was amazingly accepted to the Founder Institute. That mini accelerator and that experience of bringing in people and helping them work on their concept and launching them into the world. And lo and behold, the individual that was leading the Founder Institute in Seattle at that time was Dave Parker. And the moment I met Dave, Dave is one of those, as you'll learn here, he is one of those people that will love you, but he'll give you direct feedback. And it was a great and amazing experience. And, Dave was the first person in my journey as an entrepreneur to believe in me and to tell me what I needed to hear. But we also established an incredible friendship and an incredible advisor friendship, founder friendship, founder and investor friendship. I don't even know what to call it, Dave. And you can, please, I want to welcome Dave Parker to the stage. I want to have him get on camera now and let's say hi. And Dave Parker, how are you doing?
Oh, this is great. It can't have been that long ago because I'm not that much older.
Me neither. The gray hair keeps coming in for me, but I don't feel that much older than we were back in that day.
I tell people I've been doing in the startup world 20 plus years because I don't want to do the math anymore. And it's just not in my best interest to do so.
So, before we get going, I want to share that time with you and just go back and, slightly the opening question I'm going to have is kind of self-centered, but, what was your impression of, because like my impression was I was coming in and you don't know what you don't know, but, it's been a long road, but like, I just remember I was nervous to come into office hours with you and you were a nice guy.
Why don't you actually go back to the first night? You and your co-founder.
Yeah.
I don't remember your co-founder's name at this point.
Sean. It was Sean.
So we haven't stayed in touch, but I don't know if you remember that you actually got locked out of the building because I'm not sure if you got there late or you didn't read the email. There was some reason that you did not get up the elevator and the elevator was locked. Remember that? So what's funny, you guys, is that Nick and his co-founder climbed 28 floors of stairs and started knocking on the door to the locked, stair elevator to get into the event. So at that point I went, I think this guy has some, he's going to stick to something. That's something to be said for that. But I don't know if you remember that or not, but.
I think I kind of blocked that out, but look, that sums up my life. So I thank you for bringing that up. But, Dave, just like looking over your bio here, 5-time startup founder, sold 3, closed 2, part of 10 Exits. Amazing. You're a founder, a board member, advisor. You were SVP of programs at Up Global. So you spent some time as the CEO of, what was Startup Weekend, became Up Global. You led that into the acquisition with Techstars. You've been a mentor. I mean, you've done it all, but then you've also now authored and published a book, which we're going to get to. But you've done a lot, Dave.
Thanks. Yeah, it's kind of a crazy journey in some ways. The book feels like a culmination of everything, which is kind of scary, because when you put it out there, you're like, I hope people actually care. That would be like super amazing. So that's always kind of fun.
Well, and we will get to that, because there's some meat in that book. And, I'll be honest, just got it. Obviously, it just released, so I haven't had time to really dig in, but so excited to go through it. And we're going to get there. But you know what I want to do, Dave, is I want to go far back. I want to go quite far back. And I really want you to dig into the moment early in your life that you decided to take this path and this journey as an entrepreneur, and maybe why.
Sure. So funny story. My dad was not an entrepreneur. He worked at the same company his entire life. My grandfather, who passed away before I was born, was an entrepreneur. And he owned the first Ford garage in Camas, Washington in 1911. And I have a picture that I keep of it on my desktop, because there's this big sign that says, Parker's across the top. And he's standing behind it, a American Eagle motorcycle. And they've got these, Model Ts there, because Ford originally sent the pieces of the Model Ts out into the community, and you would reassemble them. So he was called a remanufacturer. The whole idea of the assembly line hadn't been invented until 1913. And the other thing that was super interesting about it, Nick, is there's these big barrels out in front, because it was the gas station, because there was no infrastructure for the entire thing. So 1911, he owned the first Ford garage in southwestern Washington. Now, sadly, he sold it too early, but he did jump on the next new technology, and he created the first phone company in southwestern Washington. So I got a little homage to my grandfather behind me. And he sold that too early too. So if anything, I've now with 12 or 13 accents under my belt, the answer is I'm selling them all the time. But no, it was super fun. That was my first experience of like knowing the legacy of my grandfather, but not understanding it. The other thing is I grew up in a super small town in southwestern Washington called Washougal, Washington. So really close to Portland. It's a suburb of Portland today, but at the time it was a mill town. And I had 101 people in my graduating class. A whole 7 of us went to college. Wow. And I knew for sure that I saw one of my friends who was a couple of years ahead of me that had the same scholarship I was on to get to the University of Washington, which was that, if you guys remember Caddyshack, the movie, I got to college on the Caddy Scholarship Program. And he actually came home after the first year and quit. And I was like, I couldn't imagine. Like, I couldn't imagine coming back. Not that there's anything wrong with that small town, but when you grow up in a super small town, you're like, getting out is kind of a big thing. So yeah, first off, I think it was a big motivation to pull away. And then the whole idea of like, do I want to start something? And, I definitely have adult onset ADD where it's, unmedicated is best. So I ended up working on a bunch of things, but that was kind of the history and the draw and kind of the pull towards entrepreneurship. I don't know if my kids will follow me or not in that whole journey thing, because it's kind of wacky, right? It's got lots of ups and downs, that's for sure.
It very much does. Kind of on that note, I'm going to say a statement, and I would like you to add to it. You can achieve anything you put your mind to. Do you agree with that? And then what nuance would you add to that statement of a striving and achievement?
Yeah, I have to parse it a little bit, because in the venture community and kind of where I live, there's this phrase around the idea doesn't matter, only execution matters, except for one thing. It assumes that what you're working on is actually a good idea. And there's a whole bunch of really crappy ideas that you shouldn't like waste your life on. So I feel like we've, my generation, I'm at the end of the very end of the baby boomer generation, not just barely a boomer still. And I feel like we haven't told people the truth. Like we've said, follow your passion and money will follow. and it assumes that your passion is actually something you can monetize, right? So, because if you have a passion that you love, but it's not monetarily viable, then and I hate to throw a cold bucket of water on it, but like knowing how you're going to make money is important. And I look back to my first startup and I'm like, oh my God, I want to start that company today, knowing what I know. I over-indexed on learning how to run a business and start a business, but I didn't over-index first on like learning how to make a living.
Yeah.
And then decide like, oh, well, I've decided that that's really should be a nonprofit, right? So, because you can still change the world through going and making a lot of money and giving that money away. But you need to know too, if you're going to run a business, you need to know how to make money at the business, and that's super important. So yes, you can do anything you want, and I'm a big believer of that. I also think think of it as sidelines and goalposts to a soccer pitch. If you're outside the sidelines, it's just not going to work as much as you're passionate about it. So I know that runs counter to the counterculture today, but at the same time, I think it's true.
Yeah. And I was going to ask how does one know when they're maybe outside those lines or not? And we're going to get to that with the book, because I do think that that's what you're inevitably bringing to the world. But I want to get a little deeper in that on you're not necessarily a spring chicken anymore. You do look like it, but have you discovered your why? Have you discovered your deeper direction of what you would like to see with this path?
Yeah, I think we're working on some fun stuff these days, and I love what I get to do in the world. So I think when I had a chance to go to work for Startup Weekend, the thing there was what we did every day was get a chance to change the world. So give people context if you're not on a Startup Weekend. When we sold Startup Weekend to Techstars, the prior 12 months, we had done 1,265 events worldwide with 74,000 attendees in 120 countries. And we had this weird week called Global Entrepreneurship Week, and we would do events on both sides of it. So everybody would travel those 2 weekends, at least during the year, and run events. In my case, it was Moldova and Budapest. Amazing cities, right? And then everybody's totally burned out at the end of November. And December that year, we ran 21 events worldwide. They all happened to be in Iran. But none of us could have gone to Iran, right? But the fact is we had facilitators who were running these programs worldwide, from the Dutch folks and a bunch of other folks who went and ran these events. Because one thing that's been interesting for me is everywhere I go in the world, founders are the same, and it's my tribe. We may speak a different language, we may look different, but the fact is they're trying to change their world, their economics, give back to their community. Those things all matter. So these days I'm spending a lot of time in the Middle East. When I can go back again, right? Next trip will probably be to Morocco, and I'm on Jordan towards the end of the year, I hope. So the why there really is, can I leave my community better than I found it? Starting with Seattle and then going global. And it's harder today without the Startup Weekend platform, because right now I'm very focused on Washington State and then US, but we're also doing some stuff in Sub-Saharan Africa and MENA around curriculums, around how do people come up with the right, like what ideas should I be following. But yeah, so some fun stuff there. We're working on a national grant that we can hand a template to a city or a state that wants to roll out startup programs in their community, and the narrative that'll help them get the grant that we're currently getting for Washington State. And all the programs are programs like supporting what you do and supporting what Startup Grind does and Startup Weekend does, where you don't have to go invent the curriculum or the program. The program's already done. Like, just implement it. And then that'll help change your community. And ultimately, I think it changes people's lives and changes jobs, and turns people's lives around relative to that.
Yeah, I love that. We share that, and I think that it is interesting when it flips to the global, and I don't know how to say that any differently than I think me 4 or 5 years ago, just being in Seattle was one perspective, and you're like, I'm gonna make the Seattle startup community better, and there's nothing wrong with that, but then when you have a global experience and you realize that, as you said, we're all the same. And I say this too. We are like Zimbabwe. When I was in Zimbabwe, seeing and being in a Founders Live event in Zimbabwe, looking around, I'm the only really one that looks like this, yet it's all entrepreneurs. And then everyone's talking the same language, basically. And I'm just like, this is my tribe. And it's beautiful. And when you start having a global perspective, it changes things, but it also reinforces it.
Yeah, I think the thing I say in every group of folks, Nick, as I get out, I'm like, the great part, you can look around this room, call it 100 people in the room. So we all know the math says 75 to 90% of startups are going to fail. That's really a bummer. Here's what I love about this group of people, however. They all know that it's not them. They all know that they're the ones that are going to succeed, right? So we, by nature, are just a little delusional. Sometimes a lot delusional. I mean, the math says in 100, there's going to be a couple that are completely delusional, mind you. But the thing I love about what I get to do is everywhere I go in the world, that's a completely different temperament, group of people speaking a completely different language. But I mean, everything's different, right? The culture is completely different, but it's the same. It's the same people, and I love that. That's something that just it's what keeps me on the road and going to places that are new, and having a bucket list of still places I want to travel, which is definitely not list.
Yeah, well, it makes life much more interesting, and it's just amazing.
I haven't got to Australia.
With that being said, how do you
to Antarctica yet? Those are the two continents I've left.
Me too, in the sense of we're not there yet either. We'll hopefully we get to Australia soon, and I would love to be there and get there. How do you approach when I say a balanced life? It's not 50-50, but how do you work through the work on either a book or a company or investments, and then having a life that you clearly want to enjoy time with your family, your partner, being healthy? How do you go about that?
Well, let me give you some context first, and then super tactical things. So context is we have 4 kids. We've been married for 33 years. So that gets the spring chicken thing off as well. So 2 of them are out of the house. So we actually downsized last year. We moved twice during the pandemic. So we downsized and then got a rental that we were like, we're just going to kind of find the right place to be, and or the right 2 places to be. And then we kind of found a unicorn property here outside of Seattle that we just love. And so we ended up just saying, nope, we're just going to do 1 instead. So my life is in a different phase. We don't have a lot of young kids around, which is awesome and exhausting if you're a parent. Other than a new puppy who may come and interrupt us at some point because she's just a little over a year and she's super energetic. So that's kind of the context of my life. So most of my time is spent helping founders sell their companies at this point. That's kind of my 80% time. And then my 20% time is really community building and really focused on how do we take these programs and make them scalable. So that's kind of how I spend my time today. The nice thing about the sell side work that I do is it really ebbs and flows, right? So when I'm not doing a sell side deal, which is really just helping the founder get ready for exit and then helping negotiate their way through it, then I've kind of got 100% time to work on the stuff I love to work on. So in essence, that really funds the passion work, because selling to founders, as you know, founders don't have any money they shouldn't be spending on validating their idea, like hiring consultants or like it doesn't make it's crazy. So I've long since given up on like, oh, maybe we can monetize via a coaching program.
Yeah.
No, just because the founders need to spend money on validating their idea, right? So, and I think Startup Weekend was good for me for that, because it really reinforced the give first mentality of really enabling people in their community to make an impact on their community. So that's context. So then tactically speaking, I'm a cyclist now. A few years ago, I had a new hip put in. If success is choosing your parents well, I totally failed.
Yeah.
So regular Peloton rider, and 3 years ago, I rode this really ridiculous ride around Mount Rainier in one day. Called Ramrod, and it was 154 miles and 10,400 feet of vertical. And that year I rode 5,600 miles. So, which a friend of mine after was like, wait, you rode 100 miles a week? And I'm like, oh yeah, I did. I didn't think about it. So, so staying healthy is super important. I time block my calendar. So though my calendar is available to footer on all my emails, there's not a lot of time available on it because I block my most productive times for the things that I need to do. So for me, that's mornings. So it's only exceptions that get on my calendar in the mornings for sure. And I found that either you can rule the calendar or it will rule you, but there's very little middle ground on that one for sure. So that's some tactical tips. So if you don't do what's called calendar blocking, I would encourage you to do so. I'm kind of a tools geek as well. Like I will try any hack that helps me get tools that saves me time, right? So which is probably a little overkill, but I'm used to it.
Love those, and I definitely calendar block, or block calendar, I guess you say it, and I live by it as well, and love it. So we're gonna take a little stop here, or at least we're gonna bring in our first comment here, and we've got Gary Malcolm. So Gary, get ready and unmute yourself, say hi, and you've got some thoughts and questions.
Hey Gary.
Hey. Hi, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So my question is around startup founders that are coming to the end. Well, first of all, just thanks. Thanks, Dave, for being who you are in the community and for startup community being a part of it for a few years now. It's like really great to see people like you. So now the question, if of startup founders coming to the end of their bootstrap runway, right? However, whatever that they created that to be, like what advice would you give them? Where should they focus? Should it be on fundraising? Should it be on traction? Should it be on what would any advice around that?
Yeah, so most startups, Gary, have one big question they need to answer. Is a pretty consistent theme. So depending on the stage of your startup right now, and do you have product yet?
Oh, it's not mine. It's a client.
Oh, got it. Okay. So the first early validation is really personal runway and how long do they have, and being realistic about that, because the big thing there is just like I've watched so many founders be like, oh, I'll put a second mortgage on my house, and oh, it'll cost me a relationship. And I'm like, oh my God, no. Like, go validate your idea first and make sure that the customer actually cares before, because you don't need to take dumb risks to pursue your startup. Right? If anything, you should act like the first investor in your startup, and you should take the same standard an investor would take to put their money in, because it's their money, because it's their time. Right? So if they can't do it as a side hustle anymore and they have to make a decision around like keeping benefits and salary, then the answer is, should I put it into a side hustle mode? And in that case, what do I need to do to validate the idea to prove out that I should go make the jump into a full-time gig? So that typically starts with market first. I'm a big fan of that. You really need to have knowledge of who the market is and who your ideal customer profile is first, and then go validate it with them and have the customer tell you that they actually care and they're willing to pay for it. So kind of knock that one out of the park first, and then you can make a go, no-go decision on personal runway. So keep in mind, a founder without personal runway and the ability to go sell a product is really just unemployed and enthusiastic.
Got it.
Yeah.
Test mode.
Yeah.
So great. Perfect. So if they've done a fair amount of validation and their niche is like fairly good, right? Like, and I get that I'm being pretty specific here and about a situation, but it's like they're at that spot. Do they put their money into traction? Do they just concentrate on fundraising and let the app be what it is?
I always lead with, so there's three types of entrepreneurs, right? There's franchise entrepreneurs, people like Rich Barton.
Yep.
Right? If Rich said, I'm going to go start a new business, people would be like, I'll write you a check, right? There's repeat entrepreneurs like me. So I've raised money for, I've raised $12 million. I've exited $85 million. They've all been singles, no unicorns, very little fairy dust to be found. I'm a mere mortal in that category.
Yeah.
But today, if you're a first-time founder, the answer is you need some form of traction. So you have to have that in either customer validation data, like I've done 100 customer interviews and 75 people said they would buy it, or I have to get it in terms of users, right? Which is how many people are using my site on a daily basis. Is it 2 or is it 2,000? So the question is how much money do I need to spend to validate that idea so that when I go out to sell or to raise money, I can actually raise it. Now, raising money is a kind of a challenge in that there's information asymmetry in how you raise money, right? So if I'm a friend and family member and you come pitch me an idea and I'm like, I just believe in Gary, we'll write him a check. So that's information asymmetry in the founder's benefit. We're dealing with venture capital. Information asymmetry is in the venture capitalist's benefit. They know the terms they've written deals on, they know what they've funded, and they know what they passed on or missed, right? So the caution there is it can make Thanksgiving super awkward to raise money from friends and family if you didn't do the validation first. So figure out how much money. So my advice, if it was a friend over a coffee, is figure out how much money you're willing to spend to validate the idea, give it a time frame, and if you can't validate it in that time frame, park it. Go get some more savings, then use the app that you've already created to go do the next phase, right? So if you really want to bootstrap it and you're coming to the end of your runway, because runways are always shorter than we expect them to be, and I can tell you when you feel like you could go further out, you actually can. It's just not necessarily advisable. So if you have to self-fund it, park it, get a job, build up some cash savings, go out and try it a little bit more. But be careful about the fundraising stage based on who you're raising money from, for sure.
Got it. Perfect. So, can I jump in with one more quick follow-up question?
Unfortunately, no, Gary. I know you got a lot, but
I got a lot.
We got a lot of people in line. So
We'll get back in the queue.
Great. Thank you. All right. See you.
Thanks, Gary.
All right. So we are going to take our one more question, and then we're going to dive into a lot more about the book. But I'm going to bring on Sean. So Sean, if you are ready, I'm going to bring you on the stage. Sean, unmute yourself, and you've got a bit of a question here for Dave.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, thanks for being here. This is great stuff. Definitely going to get your book. But my question was, over the years with all the startups that you've founded, what are the fundamental growth frameworks that you keep coming back to? What are the ones that have fallen by the wayside? What are the ones that they keep serving you well?
Oh my gosh, you're like did Nick tee you up to write about the book topic?
He only paid me a small fee.
Oh,
don't
exactly.
worry.
Let me know. I'll get my shirt. Yeah, we can make sure I sign it for you. So let me, without going too far into that one, to Nick's point. So I think that a couple things is, so the CB Insights data says that startups fail because they build a product nobody wants. So if you break that down, it really is two things. It's either not super useful, it's not really solving a problem, or it's not fun if it's a B2C app, right? So think of it from the standpoint of like, either it has to solve a problem or it has to solve distraction, right? And solve boredom. So it's either not fun or useful, and people won't pay for it. So the first thing I think about is like, okay, well, let's think about how you're going to monetize this strategy, right? Because if you think about your business model, Sean, it's broken into three big buckets, right? So I'll break them down for you here, but they're definitely in the book, and we definitely break them down as a Venn diagram. The first thing that you need to think about is how you create value. So back to the earlier question of like, is the product useful or not? So you're creating value is either it's your product or your service or a combination of both. It's the market that you serve, and it's your team. So all of those things have an expense associated with building the product. How many engineers will it take? How many marketers will it take? Right? How many people are required to build this product? Is it easy? It's an app. So the average app on, I think Apple gets $3,000. Right? So the answer is it better be worth your time. So, but there's a cost to build the product. So that's engineers, people, time, and support, delivery. The second piece of the Venn is how you deliver value. And those pieces are how you monetize, how you market, how you sell, and ultimately price your product. Those are the components of how you deliver value. So that's it. So, and the last piece is what's left over, right? Which is total sales and net profit. So if your cost of sale is super huge, your net profit is going to be super low. If your cost to build it is super huge, but it's cheap to sell it, which it never is, then your gross margins are going to be super low. If your cost to build it and your cost to sell it are both high, there's no margin left over. So the first thing is I want to have a thesis on how I'm going to make money. And the thesis will be wrong, but at least you need to have one. So think of it like, back to my biking analogy. If I'd gone and rode that ride before I trained for it, the answer is that ride would have killed me. It's a stupid ride. It's you're climbing through Mount Rainier. So I trained 24 days a month on average for the first quarter of that year. So how you prepare for it and what questions you ask yourself about, should I be doing this or not? Does this make sense or not? Are super important at the early stage, because you may look at it and go like, this is a super big idea. And big ideas, by the way, should always scare you just a little bit. Like they should be a little bit transformational. If they're not, they're probably incremental ideas and they won't be quite as exciting. But those are the three pieces of it. So it's how do I create value? It's my product or service. How do I deliver value, which is my pricing, revenue models, marketing, and sales. And then what's left over is my sales and net profit. So it takes kind of the black box of like, oh, it's in my business model. Nope, those are the components of a business model. There's no other components I've found yet.
Amazing. And as a fellow cyclist in Seattle, I hope you organize a startup cycling event this summer.
I have laughed with some VC friends. Apparently, cycling is the new golf for VCs, apparently. But I'm one shot in. I'm looking forward to the second shot and looking forward to actually getting out and riding with somebody. But yeah, I'd love it. It'd be super fun. We definitely have a group on Facebook that we notify people like, hey, we're going to go out on Saturday and do a 50. So look forward to it. Thanks, Sean. Good question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Dave, I just want to clarify. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
And hold on. Let's see. Amelia, we're gonna remove you, Amelia. And then yeah, we're gonna remove Amelia. We're gonna jump into the book now. So all right.
Don't worry.
So excited. So as we get into the book, so we're talking about trajectory, startups, ideation to product market fit, a handbook for founders and anyone supporting them. So everyone, as an entrepreneur and a founder, this becomes your handbook. Dave has spent many, many years studying and crunching numbers and all this. Before we get into the hard
data, it's crazy.
It's all crazy. So finish this sentence for me, Dave. By bringing this book into the world, I wanted to...
Two things. One, I wanted to help founders not waste 80,620 hours of their life on a dumbass idea. That was number one. Second, I wanted to help them compress the time it takes them to go from ideation to launch and find product market fit to a shorter time frame, not 2-3 years, but like if you can't prove your idea and validate your idea in 4 or 5 or maybe 6 months, then you're probably working on the wrong idea and just holding too tight to it. And one of the challenges for early stage founders is they typically have one idea. And so if they say no to it, right, they're like, oh, the baby's ugly. But my point is that I don't want you to fail fast. I want you to kill bad ideas fast. Failure is super expensive, personally, I can tell you. But killing bad ideas fast is a framework that you can think through to say, like, is this the idea I want to pursue or not? And if it is, how will I know? And when do you want to know? Do you want to know in 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years? Right. So I hope it's on the 6 week side and not on the 6 year side. Right. So those are the two goals that I had in writing the book.
Awesome. And I do want to jump in here. I'm getting some messages that people aren't hearing me. If you are hearing me, just throw some good thumbs ups and yeah. Okay. So good. You can hear me. I think that's a good sign. So all right. You know, Dave, how did you approach? You sectioned out the book in a really interesting way. I mean, I haven't read it yet just because I just got it. It just came out. But how, you sectioned it by like, you're even coming out of the gate saying, why are you doing this? And I think that's a pretty prevalent question to ask a founder is, first of all, like, what do you,
why?
And then you say context matters. So maybe go through those two. Let's go those topics right here. Why are you asking that question? And then why does context matter?
Yeah, so first, the why question is something you need to answer for yourself, because what I've discovered, Nick, is I can help you with your what and the how, but I can't answer your why question for you. That's a deeper intrinsic question of why do you want to do this? I want to make $1 billion, or I want to change the world, or right, I want to create jobs for people who are underrepresented. Whatever your why is very abstract, and it drives the what and the how. But what I've discovered is like you need to go discover your why on yourself, and whether that's a meditative journey or a walk in the park, or singing to yourself in the shower, like however you do that, it's all your thing. And everybody has a different approach to it. When you figure that out, the what you need to do and how you need to do it is really what I put into the big center part of the book around, like, here are your deliverables over the next 4 to 6 months. And there's 30 deliverables. And the people are like, where do I submit them? I'm like, this is not school. This is your company. You don't submit them to anybody. But the faster you do the work, the faster you get validation and actual traction and trajectory to launch your company. So the first thing was you need to understand your why. And here's why context matters. So timing matters. So when I started my first company, we were a month into the company. My wife was diagnosed with cancer. So she's fine today. She had a form of Hodgkin's disease. Wasn't a pleasant experience, right? But my point there is that life happens while you're doing a startup, right? Kids, family, because life's going to continue to roll on and exist in a parallel universe to your startup, right? And that's why context matters. So you need to know your why. You need to know your co-founder's why. You need to celebrate the highs and be there for everybody with the lows. But you need to have the understanding of like, what do I need to know that's going on in the external world at the same time? So do you have the runway, like we talked about earlier? Like, those are things that you need to think about that have little to do with the business itself and the what and how you need to do it, and a lot to do with whether you'll succeed or fail because of the context. So again, training example aside, if I didn't do the work, you're not ready to do the ride. So context says, is now the right time? Do I have enough personal runway? Do I need to set aside some cash? Because I think part of the reasons the statistics are so high is people don't go like, oh, this is going to cost me $50,000 and I can do it for $5,000. And like I said, we're all a little bit delusional, right? So the math doesn't apply to us, but actually the math does apply to us. So helping you understand that up front is super important, like why companies fail.
Yeah.
And I break down why companies fail from the very start.
And who do you think this is exactly for? Do you think this is for the aspiring entrepreneurs? Do you think you wrote it for, okay, you're in, but here's the truth in the way that I, Dave Parker, see it?
Yeah, I think it's the earliest stage, Nick. It's somebody who's like, I have an idea and I want to know if it's good. Like, so one of the chapters I wrote was actually an ideation, and I originally didn't have it into the program that we were running in Seattle at the time. So we ran 4 cohorts of this as a program to test the content, and that was my MVP, right, before I finished the book. So it took me longer than it should have, but at the same time, it was actually validated by the market. And somebody came up to me after the first session, and they're like, I love this. This was so great. I'm so inspired. I don't have an idea. And part of me is thinking to myself, like, how did you get in here, right? Like, I don't understand. How did you even find this? Let alone, I'm flattered. But I didn't want to give it a flippant answer. So I told her at the time, I'm like, let me be thoughtful about my reply, as opposed to sometimes I need to be more thoughtful. But let me be thoughtful about my reply, and I'm going to come back and address the question. So it ended up being a chapter in the book that I wrote about around 11 frameworks of what makes ideas work. And it's not my frameworks. It's Rich Barton's is a good example of like power to the people. So he started Expedia within Microsoft and then started Zillow, where the concept is, how do you take opaque data sets and make them open to the consumer so you give power to the people? So that's one example. So I outlined 11 frameworks of what famous entrepreneurs have done and said, like, your idea may not fit into those, but it probably should kind of fit into those. So by listening to what the customer was saying, I was like, that's a great question. I didn't actually answer that in the book. I need to come back and answer that question. So we put that into the process as well. So that was a good starting point for the process of understanding what my customer really needed. So some of them are entrepreneurs and just want to be founders. Some of them have a really good idea and a co-founder and a team, but they can't spend too much time wandering around the wilderness because they don't have the capital to do that. Like, you don't have to learn everything for yourself for the first time. There is a shortcut to the trail.
Yeah.
I think there are corporate innovators who will use this as well. And I've definitely had a bunch of students who are applying it to their academic process. But, students have a unique challenge and opportunity in that when the professor says, go find a problem, there's typically 4, right? Books, food delivery, dating, and housing. And that's and we've had some great apps. Snapchat's a great example of that, right? Swiping left and right is a great example of that. But, most founders are average age is 42 based on the Kauffman Foundation data. So yeah, those are the 4 audiences, but really around the founder and helping them compress their time.
Yeah. So I want Janine to be prepared. We'll bring you on in a short second here. But break it down a little bit, because we talked earlier and you were mentioning around these business models and revenue models and all of that. We don't have a long time here and enough time to go through them all, but can you on a high level touch on really the meat of this book and how you illustrate that based on revenue multiples and based on the business model that you enter into as a founder in a company creating will determine the trajectory of the startup in some way?
Totally. So let me give you the quick overview. So if a funny thing happened, somebody at one point said, hey, can I have your financial model? And I was like, well, I can give it to you, but you'll break it. But I'll give it to you anyway. But yours is a business to consumer marketplace, and mine's a business to business subscription. So it led me down this path, Nick, of like, well, how many templates would you need to have so you could give everybody like a template, right? So I reached out to the CEO of Crunchbase at the time. They didn't have an API, and I just said, hey, can you just give me a list of like every seed-funded company for the last 18 months? So that ended up being 2,654 companies. And then we started tracking through, and my son, who was in college at the time, and we hired an offshore team, and we started tracking their product and pricing page and looking at what revenue model do they use. And I didn't really, I guess I was thinking there was a lot of them, and there ends up being 14. And then because it took me so long to write the book, we ended up doing a 5-year longitudinal study of those same 2,654 companies, and then tracking how long it took them to raise money from their seed round to their A round and from their A round to their B round, as well as how many failed. So come to find out, there's 14 revenue models. That's it. And which one you choose, it will dramatically impact the outcome of what you sell your company for. So I'll give you a couple examples. A consulting company or a services business, that's B2B. Let's say Nick and I start a services company, right? And we do consulting for startups. Bad idea, don't do it. And we do $1 million in revenue. That's awesome. That company will sell for $1 million. Now, let's say we do a subscription company that is a B2B company and does $1 million in revenue. That company will sell between 8 and 12 times revenue. So that same company, same amount of time, will sell between $8 and $12 million. So the revenue model you pick has a direct outcome on the value of the company when you go to sell it. Which, by the way, if you back it up, is the same outcome that it will have on your fundraising opportunity as well.
Right.
Because if you have the right fundraising model, that'll help you raise money.
Yeah, and I want to step in here and say, do you think the result of a book like this might influence let's go on a large scale, but it influence like teams early on looking at these models and determining which one's the path that they should follow? And my follow-up to that is there a sharp side of the sword on that might, if we go too far, having too many of these types of business models, will that like off balance the market? I don't know if that comes across right. And the question,
a big trend for sure around companies doing subscription businesses. And I would say that would be you can buy your LaCroix water off Amazon in a subscription model these days, which is just crazy. But I'll give a quick couple examples. So, in companies. So if you've used Chime uses a model, it's called lead generation. The product is free to you, but they get paid as a referral fee. So it's called lead gen. So subscription, you get Box, Dropbox, Spotify, Salesforce. Those are all subscriptions. A really interesting one is Snap. So Snap uses the new media model, right? So think of new media and old media, right? So new media would be Snap. Old media would be like Mashable, who's owned by a publicly traded company that split their shares. An old media company is going to sell for 1.2 to 2.5x revenue, where Snap's revenue multiple is 25 times. So you're talking about dramatic numbers, right, that come down. Now, not everybody's product will fit that model. And sometimes if you pick a particular thing, so let's say you're doing a marketplace, you have two options with a marketplace: transaction fee plus the subscription. That's it. So because you chose a marketplace. But early stage, I would say you need to pick a primary and a secondary model, because if your primary is wrong, you can pivot quickly to the secondary revenue model. And the big thing there is that you shouldn't over-index on what you're going to sell for, right? You need to over-index on the problem first and getting the right product that fits the problem, but have a thesis on how you're going to monetize, because you're not going to wait 3 years to figure out, like, and then we'll figure it out later. Like that's just crazy, right? That's not a good use of your time as a founder.
I love that. And it's thank you for, first of all, thank you for writing this. I know it was like a long time coming, but thank you for putting a framework that I think my gut feeling says that over time, this framework, and as the market adopts this book, it's going to become more of a stronger hold of a framework, and we can start pointing to and making more clear, oh, you're which one of the 14 are you choosing? And being more clear about that in the beginning is such an important thing. So I think that this book has a possibility to be doing that.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really the hope. I was on with a group from, I was doing a program for botting a couple weeks ago, and somebody was pitching their idea, and I'm like, oh, you're a marketplace that monetizes on a transaction fee and a subscription. They're like, how did you know that? I'm like, there's only 14.
Because I wrote the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, right? You're not going to go invent your own. So in the course of the 6+7 years we've been watching them now, there's been one model died, which was Groupon. Right, they're still around, but the popularity, revenue models are not, you can't create competitive advantage with them. They're super easy to copy. Remember how many people have copied Groupon. Metered services came up, right? That was a new one, which was basically like your old phone bill that you would pay more as you use more. Super negative experience on the business to consumer side. But if you're doing AWS, it usually means your customers are using your product more, so it's a super positive experience. So, and then coins and tokens happened, but ultimately they weren't a revenue model, it was a financing model. And remember that old one called licensing?
Yeah.
Right? Software licensing has basically fallen away in favor of subscription, right? But those are the only 4 things we've seen over 7+ years. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's really interesting. All right, Janine, get ready, because I want to pull you on stage, and I would like you to give a little more context into your question around, basically validating your idea. So, Janine, we're bringing you on. Unmute there, and let's have you join the conversation.
Hey, I think I'm unmuted. I think you sort of touched on this, but I guess I would ask a follow-up question.
Sure.
So I understand that trying to do a consulting business that targets early stage startups is a bad idea, as you said. And honestly, that's both my gut feeling, but on some level, that's sort of the opportunities that are coming up. I'm wondering if you think, for example, using a subscription or pay per service kind of combination would be a more effective way to monetize offering some type of education and assistance to the startups.
Probably not. So, and I don't mean to be discouraging. I used to be way more pedantic when Nick met me. I'm much nicer now than I used to be. So here's the reason: startups don't have money to spend, and what capital they do have to spend has to be spent on them validating their idea. So the challenge is that if you're a co-founder, you're typically working for free. So if I have a choice of, I've got my top 5 list of things I have to get done today, and unless your service answers one of those top 5 things, it's fighting for very limited capital and very limited time. So, my AWS subscription or Azure subscription will, like, when I run out of credits, will come first. Paying designers to work on my product, paying developers to build the product. So if it's not in the top 5 list of things I have to get done today, the answer is it's super hard to sell to startups. Plus, I think from a community perspective, my perspective on the stuff I do now in the community, especially in Seattle, is we just give it away free and know that ultimately you're going to pay it forward. right? My big request from people are, how can I help you? I'm like, mentor people who don't look like you. That's the number one thing, right? Because you can't pay me. I won't take it, and B, you don't have any money. So if I'm going to do consulting, I'm going to do consulting for big companies who have money or startups who have raised enough money that they can afford to pay you, right? Because otherwise you'll be frustrated as an entrepreneur and consultant, and changing your pricing strategy or monetization model won't answer the fundamental question, which is you have to sell to people who actually have money to pay you. And the founders just sadly won't be that until they, it's why folks like attorneys sponsor events, because they recognize in the early stage the best they can do is meet you before you need them, right? And they make great sponsors, and we love them. Without them, nothing in the ecosystem would work. Not just the attorneys, just the sponsors in general. Wish I had better news for you there. Pick a different target customer and ICP.
So pick for example, either like big companies or find a way to get to the funded startups only.
Yeah, you may be able to go to a Series A funded company and get them to pay for your service. What service do you do, Janine?
My plan is to create an offering around networking, education, content, and community. And I was planning to target B2B SaaS, finance, and investing startups. I have 5 as a sort of a short list that where I'm actively, talking to them and really like think there could be something.
So one of the areas you want to think about with that type of business, and for everybody to go meta here for you, is who is the buyer within the organization who's willing to pay for that service? For a startup, it has to be the CEO, because the CEO is the only one that really controls the budget. For the type of service to do education, it's probably somebody in HR. So to even have an HR department, right, then the question will be, I have to be of a certain size. Or you could go work with somebody who is an HR outsourcing company and provide this as a service to them that they could layer on to their services with their companies. But for you, you have to think of your cost of selling. And your cost of selling, I have to either go sell to the CEO or sell to the VP of HR. If it's the VP of HR, they have to have a big enough company to have a budget to pay for things like training. So I bring that as an example of, if you think about your selling process, the question is, who are you selling to? If you're selling to me as a brand new startup founder, I have 5 people and we're getting ready to launch our beta or alpha product or go live and go to market. The answer is, I so have things to worry about before I think about any of the stuff you're trying to sell me. Like, before product market fit, I always tell people there's 2 epochs in startups. There's pre-product market fit and post-product market fit. Product market fit is when the customer actually loves what you have and is willing to buy it, and you're not going to pivot again, at least for a while. Your first sprint, if you're before product market fit, is just to get to product market fit. After PMF, you can fix all kinds of things. My culture sucks. Awesome, I can hire somebody to help me fix that. I need to know how to run a board meeting. Great, I can show you how to do that. But there's a whole bunch of stuff you don't need to know before product market fit, right? That mostly consultants are out trying to sell startups on why they should, figure out their accounting practices. Before product market fit, you're not going to have any profit to get taxed on, right? Now, you still need to keep your books. Don't get me wrong, right? You can't be like, oh, we don't pay anybody. No, not what I said, right? But pre-product market fit, your only goal is to get to product market fit. So just know that there's 2 epochs, and I think you should talk to the folks who are post-product market fit regardless of funding, because then they're thinking about other things.
Awesome. Hey, Janine, I hope that answered your question, and I just want to make sure we got to move on because we got a lot of people. So
we're trusting this new thing.
I know we're learning this thing, and more important, last thing I want to say is Janine, Dave. Janine is our city leader in Atlanta, Founders Live Atlanta. Yeah. So thank you, Janine, for everything you do.
Oh, you're welcome, and thanks for bringing me on stage.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so Kimberly, I want you to get ready because we're going to answer one more question with Dave here, and then we are going to move on to our next segment of bringing on Chad. And so, Chad, make sure you get settled and get ready. But I'm going to bring Kimberly on to ask around funding and best ways to organize and infiltrate the right resources. Kimberly, how are you?
I'm doing well. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi. Thank you. So nice to meet you guys virtually. And this is a really cool, fun new toy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go buy it, and I really hate reading a lot. So I was looking on Audibles, just hoping it might be there
It
already.
comes out in the end of May in Audible, and for those of you who know me, you'll actually have my voice in your head. I have people say, like,
Oh,
I hear
wonderful.
your voice in my head when I think about blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm sorry, now you'll actually have my voice in your head.
That's awesome. I love it. So as a longtime business owner and entrepreneur, I've never sought funding before this last year for a business. And so I'm finding it, I've had I've had some great conversations with Nick. I'm part of the Founders Live group. I've, dancing around in some areas. What
Mhm.
is the best way to really target when we're currently pre-product, pre-revenue, but even at whatever stage you're at, what's the best way to organize inside of all the possibilities of attacking this? And of course, creating relationships is mandatory.
Yeah.
Um, but Crunchbase, you go on there and people say, well, that's not a place to go for pre-funding, and XYZ.
Well, the good news is you'll find some of those answers in the book, but let me give you a little preview to your
Okay.
question. I've actually broken it down with, like, here's a process to follow. It's an enterprise sales process. Here's how you document it. Here's where you go. But I
Yeah.
think the first thing is a very meta topic. Do you go by Kimberly or Kim?
Kimberly.
Awesome. I'm married to a Catherine, not a Katie or a Kathy or a Kat. So I always ask, right? So the first thing is your need for funding doesn't correlate to your ability to raise capital. So the first thing is stage appropriate capital. What's the right stage appropriate capital for you to raise? And raising venture isn't a sign of success. Raising venture is just a milestone in a growth trajectory, right? So the first thing is, what do you need capital for? Will be the first thing. And then where do you go get that stage of capital? Early stage capital is what's called risk capital. Later stage capital is what's called growth capital. So think about it as, if you know DocuSign here from Seattle, so the founder of DocuSign is a good friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
He was a 16-year overnight success story, because when he started DocuSign, it wasn't actually legal, right? It wasn't illegal to do an electronic signature, but it wasn't actually legal either. So when he launched it, he had to go sell people on, like, this is the future of the interwebs, right? And he would tell you that first few rounds of funding were just brutal. Now, they did a round of funding right before they went public, probably 6 months before they went public, for $400 million. And he's like, this was the easiest round of funding we ever did, because that was growth capital. It was based exclusively on the math.
Mm-hmm.
So I had my growth metrics. I knew if I spent $10,000 a month on this, if I spent $100,000, the math would go up. So if you're at the risk capital stage, the first thing is to identify, what do I need cash for and what am I going to go prove? Not once I get capital, I'll go figure out what I need to go do. That doesn't work. You have to actually lead with, I need $10,000 to go do X. And with that $10,000 in spend, I think I can get what's called return on marketing spend. I think I can get 34 days, 96 days, 174 days required to get that return on marketing spend. So you need to have that thesis. You'll be wrong, which is totally okay. But when I look at the last venture job that I worked in, I looked at 164 deals in 12 months. Like looked at, met with had coffee with the founders, went through their decks. We invested in 2. Had I stayed at the fund, we probably would have invested in more, because I looked at really, really early stage companies. So at the earliest stage, what would happen is they would give me a plan that was totally based on them getting capital. So the 90% of the companies were like, here's my plan, and once I get the capital, I'll go do this. 10% of the companies were like, here's my plan. With or without you, I'm going to go do this. So first off, you want to be in the top 10%. Then if you're in the top 10%, the people who get funded are the ones who are like, and we're exceeding our plan, and we're going to do this. So keep in mind, the reason you raise capital then is I'm going to take this thing I had planned in Q4 of next year, I'm going to move it to Q1 of next year if I get the capital. But if I don't get the capital, here's what I'm going to go do with or without you. So know what you need, how much that is. So it's going to be in the form of a pro forma at some point, not super early. What do you use the capital for, and where do you expect it will get you? Does it get you part way to Vancouver, Canada? Does it get you all the way to Alberta? Right? Do you have to do the northern coast? Like, how do you? And there's different ways to get there. So Dan Shapiro, who's here in Seattle as well, used to say there's 2 types of trains. There's the express and there's the local. And some you have to take the local because you don't have the money to take the express, right? So that will really determine your outcome, but know what you need capital for, where it will get you, and not in the terms of like number of months. Think in terms of what are the milestones, right? So if you came to me as an angel and said, hey, I'm looking for $50,000 to get me 6 months. I'm like, I don't care about 6 months. I care about what are the milestones you would get to in those 6 months.
Mhm.
So if you start thinking about it from that framework, it'll definitely help.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was very rich.
Yeah. Thank you. Good to see you, Kimberly.
Good to see you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. This is good. I'm having a good time. I hope you all are. Dave, are you ready for feedback time?
I love this.
I know you do. All right. So we're going to bring up Chad, and I got to just grab him here and put him on stage. Where are you, Chad? I'm looking for you. Let's see. Where we got? Where's Chad there? Oh, there you are. Sorry about that. I'm going to bring you on here, Chad. So unmute, put on your camera when you can, and we're going to hear from Chad Johnson, who is a founder of Tip a Script. He is from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but he is a recent winner of Founders Live in Minneapolis that happened last week. Chad, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good.
Awesome.
Good to be here.
How you doing tonight?
I'm great. Enjoying it. Coming from the great city of Milwaukee. Glad to be a part of it. So yeah, this is a cool experience. Be a part of the beta.
Yeah. Good. So here's what we're gonna do. We would like you to go through your 99-second pitch, and then what we're gonna spend a few minutes with some Q&A and questions from Dave and then myself. And we're going to dive a little deeper than a traditional Founders Live is usually about 4 or 5 minutes of question and answer. But we're going to spend a little more time. We want to dig a little deeper. Look, I know this guy well enough. He's going to ask some questions here. And then you all listening, feel free to actually type in and ask questions for Chad as well. I think you're going to be at least interested in the direction of this pitch. And we'll just have a group feedback conversation with Chad for a little while. So Chad, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Appreciate it. Cool. Well, I'll just jump right into it. Hey, everybody, I'm Chad Johnson. I'm the founder of Tip a Script. And essentially, the basis of it is 1 in 5 adults, which is about 58 million people, report the inability to pay for their prescription medications. Many are afraid to even ask for help. And one of those people happened to be my mother. She lost her retiree insurance. She was forced to apply for Medicare, and her out-of-pocket expenses skyrocketed from less than $20 a month to over $400 a month for the same medication, which is crazy. And that's just the problem, that prescription medication expenses are increasing well beyond affordability. People are stretching insulin, they're chopping pills in half, they're staying ill or possibly even dying because they can't afford to pay. And so if someone you cared about needed help paying for their meds today, you'd probably use Cash App, Venmo, GoFundMe, or something of that sort, but you don't know necessarily how they will actually use the funds for the reason that you helped them with the money. And that's one of the reasons we created Tip a Script, where friends and family, healthcare providers, pharmaceutical companies, and eventually pharmacy customers at checkout could contribute to accounts, and funds would be placed on Tip a Script accounts and redeemed only at a pharmacy for prescription medications, medical equipment, and medical supplies. So at this point of our process, we're actually currently in the Northwestern Mutual Black Founder Accelerator, powered by Generator. We're receiving a $100,000 investment, and we're launching an MVP pilot this quarter with the largest healthcare provider in Wisconsin, where we're actually issuing an app to selected patients. We'll be providing debit cards with funds that will be placed on it for them to get their prescription medications. And at this point, what we could really use, and just with connections as we're kind of going out to market, is getting more so connected with pharmaceutical companies and healthcare or health insurance companies that would use Tip a Script as their preferred platform for prescription payment assistance to do their part to help keep people alive and well. So appreciate this opportunity to pitch it, and welcome to any questions you have.
Awesome. Thanks. So a couple questions first. So ultimately, you're going to be a marketplace. You're going to have people so you have to think about tracking them in a few different ways, right? So I've got pharmacies are going to be one of the customers. I've got givers are going to be a customer. And I've got the actual user in that case who's going to be a customer as well. So make sure as you think about the process. So the good thing about marketplaces are you're building intrinsic competitive advantage. The bad thing about a marketplace is they're really hard. So it's a good news, bad news scenario, right? So the question then will be in mature marketplaces, they're in equilibrium. So you treat all three of those customer profiles the same. In the early case, you typically leverage to the seller, right? Because if in your case, that would be the person at the pharmacy, it's the person at checkout, right? Because if I'm the user and it doesn't work where I need to go, where your mom is, then I won't use it. So you will pay money to get me as a customer, and I'll be frustrated because I can't use it. So start off first thinking about which ideal customer profile of those three and which language you're going to use to really get those customers on. So let me pull back, Nick, because I think one of the questions I want people to understand is whenever you finish a pitch, I'm always going to give you the first question that runs off my head, right? And the question should be like, how do I get a check into this deal? That's the question you want people to have. Versus, as you and I have known, we've seen a lot of scripts where you're like, can you tell me what you do again? Like, I'm a little confused, right? So that's not, yours is not that way, by the way, but some people's are. So when you're done speaking, I'm like, A, it's super interesting, definitely a problem that's broken, definitely an area of complexity, and definitely has three customers, at least, right? Because then you introduce pharma to it, and you're like, they're funders, but they're probably a fourth customer, and they're probably later. So I'd start with really getting to know the pharmacy question first. So some of the financial things you can take care of by using a tool like Plaid. So you're familiar with Plaid?
Yep.
So yeah, so that connects some of the black box stuff behind the scenes, and at least you can start to move that direction of like connecting, like I can easily give, right? There's a company out of DC that I'm happy to connect you with later that is doing, they're doing peer-to-peer lending tracking. So the off-book lending business within the US is huge, right? So my son comes to me and says, hey, can I borrow $500? Right? And I don't really want to nag him every month about getting paid, and I don't. So they're doing an app that tracks peer-to-peer lending similarly. So I'm happy to connect you with him. He was in the Rise of the Rest tour that we did with Steve Case and Rodney Sampson from OHub for founders. It was their equity tour that they did. So there's some similar mechanics here that you can follow, which is good because it gives you a playbook. So those are the complexities I think about, and I'd probably start with one use case when you tell your story of, hey, somebody wants to get this, but they're really struggling with it. How do they share that with other people? Because that will be one of your hindrances, right? Or how do I help get this out to the market without embarrassing somebody? Because that could be a gating factor for how you go to market. So I would think about telling it in that use case, and then go talk to a bunch of those customers about like, who would you want to tell it to? Like, would you want to tell it to your kids? Would you want to tell it to your neighbors? Or who wouldn't you want to tell it to? And when I do those customer development interviews, I'm looking for the extremes. I'm looking for people like, oh my God, I would, or oh my gosh, I would, right? I'm not looking for the meh responses. I'm looking for like the extreme responses, because that's going to tell you like, how do you position your messaging as well? So those are a few things I think about. Love the idea around the problem space. The HIPAA requirements will be legit, which again could create competitive advantage for you. But know that there's, you're definitely in a good spot with the accelerator to go like, figure out like, can we figure this one out or not? And what are the big hindrances? For everybody's perspective, you typically have one big thing you need to answer. But in your case, you have three big things because you have three different customers. What's the biggest problem for the pharmacy today? Well, I gotta be able to get it on a debit card that I can transact on. How hard is that going to be? That's my guess. What's the biggest problem for the consumer? I have to tell somebody I have a need. It took me 42 years and tons of counseling to admit that I needed anything, right? So how are you gonna get over that hindrance, right? And then from the distributor donation perspective, and just figure out for yourself what the number one problem in each of those customer use cases are, and go address that one first. Because if you smudge these all together, it'll get super muddy and it'll get harder to get clarity for you.
That's awesome. So I'm gonna try something. I'm gonna try to bring Andy on stage because I feel like his question is similar to the direction I wanted to take. So AJ, be ready. I'm gonna bump you up here. And AJ is one of our city leaders actually in Boston. So Andy, what's up? Hopefully you're able to unmute here. I want to get you going. But my thought, and then I'm going to bring in AJ on this, is for Chad. Your go-to market, and then end up being like, when in your feeling, Chad, when do you think, what will need to be there that you can see that you have product market fit? So I want you to answer that, and then I want AJ to kind of come in and give some thoughts on product market fit.
Well, yeah, for our MVP pilot, the actual provider actually affirmed the use case in that customer acquisition in this two things are the biggest issue for us. One, fintech is a fraternity, right? And so getting into payments, it's either about capital reserves or volume. So that was a major issue of finding the right platform that we actually are approved to sit on top of, right? And so that was one of the biggest issues. Then the second piece was making sure that, again, you mentioned, Dave mentioned, okay, which customer are you going to address the need for first? And so whether it's pharma, whether it's pharmacies, whether it's healthcare providers, or the actual patient at the end. And so what we decided to do was leverage them as intermediaries. And so our approach to this is kind of a customer acquisition play by leveraging the intermediaries. So the healthcare providers that already have specialty pharmacies, as an example, they're dealing with people with complex medical conditions. We went to them and said, would you leverage a platform like TipaScript where you could provide funds to assist them in getting their meds? And after we get them launched, then their friends and family could add to it. And they said, absolutely. We got tons of people who we could do this for, where we could use audible accountability, put funds on accounts because we know it's only going to be used for meds or equipment or supplies. And so they validated our market right away and said, oh, we love this because, again, it's audible accountability, it's restricted funds, and we can direct and aggregate it on your platform. And we're like, wow, okay, that was easier than we thought. But the technology was the most difficult part for us getting into fintech, being approved. That was we got 4 no's, 5 no's before we finally got a yes. And so for product market fit, again, using intermediaries. So healthcare providers, absolutely. And then from the, health insurance companies, our goal is really turning TipaScript into the number one and most preferred platform for prescription payment assistance. So if United Healthcare has insured and they're already giving Visa gift cards, we're saying don't do that because they can spend it on whatever they want, aggregate those funds on our platform, and it's restricted, it's only going to go for the intended use. And so we're going after the health insurance companies again as the intermediaries because they've got a captive audience who trust them. And then we're saying aggregate those dollars on our platform, and it's a volume game where we're not taking anything out of the pocket of the people that you give it to. But that's how we've been able to validate it and say, yeah, use them as intermediaries. They've got a trusted relationship, they've got a captive audience, and then we build from there and scale up.
Awesome. And so AJ, come in here and give a little bit more perspective, and let's have you add to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick, and also Chad, great presentation. And Dave, you've been amazing so far. Definitely excited to get your book soon. So thank you.
You're welcome.
My question before the pitch would even start was, how product market fit has different interpretations depending on who you ask. Whether you're asking someone that's more focused on B2B or someone that's more focused on B2C. But Dave, is there a general guideline that you could kind of list, A, B, C, when a startup knows that they do have product market fit?
Yeah, totally. Great question. In India, you're totally right, because usually product market fit is a trailing indicator, not a leading indicator. So the question is, what's pre-product market fit look like, right? Mm-hmm. So good news, it's math. It's crazy, right? So things like, as Chad looks at how many new healthcare providers are coming on, is my time to close decreasing? Is my average contract value increasing? Is my number of users, so again, within each of the customer profiles, so I've got Pharmacies have to register and sign up and get approved, whatever the process is, because they're federally regulated. Healthcare providers need to get onboarded onto the system. So all of these things move the direction of each one of those will have math associated with time to close, conversion rate metrics, and average annual contract value. So initially, the average annual contract value is going to be low, right, because it's an MVP and people are skeptical. But you can price the product for a future price and then discount for the MVP because you know in the future it's going to be more valuable. So the thing I like about Chad's model is it's going to be a subscription service plus what's called a metered service. So Chad, the model I'd encourage you to look at is Twilio. So Twilio also has an off the hook return on investment, by the way. So you can buy a text message number and then you pay per the number of messages that are sent. Your model will be pretty much the same. So you'll go to a healthcare provider and say, hey, you can onboard 1,000, and that's going to cost you a subscription fee of X. But the number of transactions they do, you're going to pay per transaction because you're going to both get charged per transaction, but you're also creating value on a per transaction basis, right? So transparency, what did they buy? What's their frequency? Do we need to send them a text message that says, hey, Dave, it's time to go get your diabetes meds, right? So those sort of things where you're creating value and you're creating stickiness so the customer won't leave you, which means the provider won't go somewhere else or try something else. So back to product market fit, it really is math, right? So I'm gonna look at each of those customer use cases, and the basic data for each case is for the provider, it's how many proposals did we create for providers? What's the average closing ratio? How many people are they onboarding? And what's it trending? Is the ACV, annual contract value, going up? Is my time to close going down? And do we have more proposals going out this month than we had last month? So you're trending towards product market fit. Now I have consumer onboarding, right? So they're going to use their outreach to help us get new consumers, because otherwise you have to do B2C marketing instead of B2B proposal writing. So how do I do one-to-many versus one-to-one? And then when I send that to somebody, how do I give them a mechanic to ask for a referral? So I'm going to start tracking my referral metrics. So how many people signed up and registered? Of the ones who registered, how many days did it take them to do their first transaction? And what's their frequency and recency of transactions would be some I would start to track. Ultimately, you may find there's one that's like the super metric, but right now those are super prescriptive, no pun intended, right? They're just like, these are ones you should be looking at because it'll help you determine your speed to product market fit. So, and again, I think it's just math, right? If I look at some of these, it's like, you're like, well, there's a 40% rule and people will be disappointed if they didn't use it. Yeah, that's true, but you have to have 1,000 users before that matters. You're like, how do I get my first 10? And then I get to 100, and then I'll get to 1,000, and then I'll ask them an entirely different question, right? But in the early days, it's really just like, look at your sales metrics and your marketing metrics.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave.
All right. Good to see you, AJ. Thank you, man. I'm going to pull you off. And then we're bringing Amelia on. So Amelia, get ready. Unmute. Say hi. What's up? Amelia, you have a question. You have a question for Chad here, it looks like, around maybe more the mechanics of the entire system.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, Chad. Great pitch. I love what you're putting down. My question is around your need validation. You said that, when you talk to people about your idea, they were excited about it. But have you been able to find that there's a gap between the current offerings and what people really need? Or can you just talk a little bit more about how you validated in the market so far?
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, this question originally came up when we first started talking. They're like, why would we do this other than Cash App, right? And so I'll start from my personal standpoint, and then also what we've been able to validate. So, how this all began is when my mother told my brothers and I about this. I flew her down to Atlanta. We were watching Shark Tank, believe it or not, and that's where she dropped the news to us. She got inspired to be kind of like, entrepreneurial, and said, what do you guys think about helping people pay for their meds? And that's where she told us what her situation was. We were upset that we didn't know she was struggling, and we're like, we got to do something about it. And typical mom stuff, I don't want to bother you guys. And so we're like, well, what's going on? And so we ourselves started thinking like, well, my brother's out of the state of Wisconsin. He's in Atlanta, Georgia. I and my brother and my mother are still in Milwaukee. I'm like, well, maybe we'll Cash App her or Venmo her each month to make sure that, she's, getting her meds. But I'm like, I really don't know if she's actually doing that. I don't want her going to the casino with the money. I don't want her buying clothes, going on trips. It's like $400 a month I'm sending her, on Cash App. And I don't know if she's getting it. And so that was more of a personal reaction. So I went out to start validating to say, hey, is there really a need for this? So I started looking up, again, some of the concerns that people have with GoFundMe's. If you kind of looked at one of the recent situations of the lady who put Gorilla Glue in her hair, right? And she ended up raising funds on GoFundMe, and they ended up restricting the account because there were concerns about whether or not she was actually leveraging the funds for the surgery that she needed to. So there's, again, as I'm talking with the different providers, that was the phrase they gave me: audible accountability. They're like, we love this because instead of giving someone a Visa gift card, it's been hard to aggregate funds in a way that it's being used for what it's intended. And so medication adherence is kind of the big issue. There's social determinants of health, and some of it is behavioral. Some people just don't take meds, but some of it is financial. And so they just want to make sure that if they're aggregating funds on the platform, that they know you're actually going to go and get it. And lastly, pharmacies pay fees for unfilled prescriptions. So the doctor writes you a script and they say, all right, make sure you go get it. You don't go pick it up. The pharmacy is actually paying a fee for that, right? So if they're putting money onto an account that's restricted and it's only able to be used for prescriptions, that bodes and increases the confidence of the givers, particularly from the B2B side. Clearly, as I'm talking with the pharmacies, pharmaceutical companies, healthcare providers, health insurance companies, they definitely prefer to go this route rather than, an entity that size putting money on your Cash App or GoFundMe, particularly on a recurring basis. So great question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was a great answer. Yeah, I'm excited to see what you have next.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited about getting a TipaScript debit card in my mom's hand in the next couple months, so she can actually go off of Cash App and now switch over to TipaScript and go use her debit card to make a purchase.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Amelia. Amelia is our city leader in Seattle. So thank you all coming in full force tonight. So good to see you. A lot of our team and city leaders here. Chad, my thoughts, I want to dive a little deeper, man. I think that there's a very interestingly purposeful thread in what you're building. Obviously, your mom is some of the inspiration around, you getting this going, but what sort of impact do you want to have, man? As this goes forward, what dent do you want to put in the world?
It's funny, when I saw that I had to log in through Twitter, I haven't used my Twitter account much at all since I created it in 2013, right? And back on your history of kind of doing sports science and whatnot, I only created it to reach out to Chad Ochocinco, believe it or not. True story. I had an idea for a book back in 2013, and I reached out to him and said, hey, I created an account, said I got an idea for a book. He didn't respond. He retweeted it, and everybody just blew up my inbox. He's a wacko. It's probably a network marketing scheme, right? But but one of the first things, I went back and looked at it literally this week, and I logged into my Twitter account, and I actually put something in 2013, which is still a personal mission statement for me, which is to be more than successful, but to be significant, right? And that's kind of a driving force for me. And so I left my career back in 2009. I worked at the largest provider, a healthcare provider in Wisconsin, wife and 2 children at home at the time. Had a daughter who was 9 and son who was 4. And I left my career working towards 6 figures. I was 29 at the time, and just pursued a passion for entrepreneurship, impact to community. And that's the journey that I've been on since 2009. And the first couple of years were rough. I mean, wife and 2 children. She's a teacher at the time. Now she's a principal. But teacher salary, family of 4. We went through a rough financial period with me being the breadwinner and leaving. But it ended up really kind of establishing a sense of grit, brought my family actually closer together, and gave me a sense of purpose. And so, entrepreneurship has kind of been a part of my journey the last 11 years. And I think a lot of what I've experienced over the last 11 years has really, in so many instances, prepared me for today, where I am with TipaScript. So, it was part of another company that I exited in 2013. I've been a training consultant for the last 7 years with Johnson Controls, Molson Coors, and Fiserv. More of a fee-for-service invoice, consulting fee, get paid. That's been pretty lucrative for me, but I don't get paid unless I show up. And I started a social impact coffee brand in Milwaukee about 3 years ago, co-founded it, where we use profit margin in coffee to really help other people benefit and do community efforts and social impact. And so that's kind of been a part of my fabric about, who I am and what I've been doing. My why, again, beyond my mother, of course, is I know my purpose is really facilitating transformation in everything that I do, whether it be in business, whether it be in service, community, family, is facilitating transformation of, people, situations, processes, businesses. And so that, having that clarity of again, of purpose and mission has really helped me to sustain grit throughout my path since I left my corporate career now over, 11 years ago.
Yeah. You're in the right community, man. You're in the right community. You're you now, you won Founders Live in Minneapolis. You are now into primetime qualification. So Founders Live Primetime, we have that. I think I told you that the other day, but that will hit now for Q2 qualification going into, we take the top 5 in each region of the world that go into the primetime events that happen in Q4, which y'all just pay attention because that's going to happen later this year. But your journey's still going here with Founders Live. So really happy for you, man.
Appreciate it. It's been a fun experience, just even in this short turnaround. It's been a great community of folks who've reached out and connected with me, even just in the last week.
So great. Dave, what would you say would be, I know it's hard to boil it down to like 2, but the 2 kind of most common or biggest mistakes that you see founders make, especially like, someone like Chad that's in his, getting going, getting that product and working on this product market, at least initial bringing it to market, getting initial usage. Is there mistakes that you would point out that you might want to warn him about?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think one of the things for everybody is you really need to narrow it in your ICP, or in Chad's case, he's got 4 potential customers, and I think he's finding validation on who the first customer is, which is, as a pharma company, we want to help people underwrite their costs, but we don't have a mechanic to do it. It's kind of like the start of the pandemic. People are like, the government wants to send you money. How the hell can they do it? It's not, there's no way for them to do it. Pharma's the same way. So it's really targeting on that first customer use case first, nailing it down before you move to the second use case. So what I hear a lot of other founders, not Chad, but other founders talk about, well, this person could use our product and that person, I'm like, I don't care about who could use it. Pick the one you're going to test first. If you find out you're wrong, pivot to the next one. But don't be like, everybody could use our product, or 6 people could use it. I'm like, no. There's one ICP, right? Your ideal customer profile is ideal. If you find out that's wrong, then pivot, right? But it's not actually pivot, it's just an iteration, right? You're just testing your go-to-market. But I think Chad's nailing it relative to if the pharma, my wife works for a big pharma company too, by the way. If pharma is willing to underwrite the cost and get dollars out there because they want to be good corporate citizens, they want to help people who can't afford to pay for their meds. If you follow the money there, you'll figure out then how to find more people like your mom. And the first thing they'll do is say to the pharmacy, or the pharma company, say, listen, we need help, right? If you just fix that, that's a big business. If you create the marketplace piece of it as well, and by the way, MIT has an open source marketplace platform, in case you don't know. It's something you can actually build on top of, and it's completely free and in GitHub and is open source. So something to think about.
Cool.
Great, thank you, Dave. Parker, you are up, and I'm going to bring you on stage. So be ready. We got Parker here, and Dave. Just an FYI, Parker is calling in here from Seattle. He might have a few questions for you as well, possibly offline. But Parker, what's up?
Hey, what's going on? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know. My camera's not working, which is a bummer because I'm a total advocate.
Okay. It's actually that's the way it works. When we bring you on, we don't actually automatically turn on your camera, so you're all good.
Bummer. I thought I was looking good today, but I guess next time I'll have to know.
Yeah. For some reason.
Yeah, so I'm super fascinated by the book and the concept, Dave. It sounds like, I've been impressed just listening in, just the ability to really bake ideas down, which is always, in my mind, a good factor of you should probably be paying attention to whatever somebody's talking about when they can do that. But I made the wise decision of launching Forage while training for my first Ironman. And I'm a huge proponent of optimizing your calendar and Life Hack Bro and Biohacker. And I already do a ton of time blocking. I'm super all over my calendar, and I love doing that. And that's the biggest thing I recommend to people. But I would be curious if there's other things you've found to be really useful to help kind of manage your life or kind of scale out your time, your effort or your resources.
So at this stage, what stage is the company in? You have product and you have.
Yeah, we have a product. We have a concept. We're sort of in the middle of validating our concept. We're raising a seed round right now. I've already raised sort of friends and family and are in market.
Okay, so if for everybody on the call who's a startup founder, in the next year you're going to be defined by what you say no to, not by what you say yes to. So if you're going to train for an Ironman, there's a whole bunch of shit you have to say no to, right?
Yeah.
So when I did Ramrod, I rode 5,600 miles that year, right? I trained 20 to 25 times a month, right? And it was just it wasn't even an option, right? So you're defined by what you say no to. So there's a bunch of stuff I didn't do that year that I do now, right? So just know over the next year, probably 2, if you're doing a startup, you're going to be defined by what, for Chad, his kids are now 15 in their range. So I have a teenager too. There's times that being away from the teenagers is super legit. It's a good thing, right? But you're gonna miss some soccer games, right? And you have to decide is that worth it or not, right? Because I don't think there's the whole concept of balance. I think is a bit of a misnomer. I think we pendulum swing as founders about all the things we have to do in life. And so far, I can tell you with the gray hair that goes with it, it's sometimes it's easier than others, and sometimes it's really hard. But so yeah, think about the stuff you're going to say yes to this year, and think about the stuff you have to say no to. And some of them may be some relationships. And I'm not saying they have to go away permanently, but in the grand scheme of things, there are some relationships where I had to say to people hey, I'm really jammed, right? And I can't wait to get back together. Or new relationships sometimes, because I like to build new relationships with people.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying no to is important. Calendar blocking is kind of well done if you're training for an Ironman, because you're doing so many miles per week, right? Especially if you're in the biohacking side of stuff, it's how do I optimize myself to perform better? So, but also give yourself time for the practical side. Is I have my phone set on the sleep mode. It reminds me, you're 45 minutes away from, and I have a regular sleep routine. Now I get up early because that's my most productive time, but I don't stay up super late, right? Healthy stuff you're doing on the, from the product side, I'm sure is good. But yeah, the meta there is just I'm going to have to say no to some things this year. What does that mean? And for me, it was I have to say no to the Mariners game. I don't really watch football. There's a whole bunch of stuff I don't do on Saturday because I have a long day and a short day on Saturday. And I'm going to go ride. And if, my family knows, hey, if I did a century ride, I'm probably going to take a century ride and then take a nap because it's rough, right? So, but I think telling people that stuff in advance, Parker, will be super helpful to keep the relationships in good balance, knowing that there's a season, and that's all it is. And then there'll be a season that you sell your company to, hopefully, and you'll be like, woohoo, that's another good season. But yeah, we're in lots of different seasons of life. Sadly, I've experienced some great ones and some sad ones, and you recognize them, and looking backwards is what they are, right?
Yeah. I guess to me, where that rings home of probably sitting down and going through an exercise of what are priorities and what's the assumed average per week, and taking a serious look. I recently read a book by Matt Dixon, if you've heard of him. He's a triathlon coach. There's this thing called the Purple Patch, but he talks about a similar concept. So that definitely rings home. I appreciate it.
And by the way, I still set goals every year, right? There's a bunch of years I didn't, and amazingly, I didn't achieve as much, as when I set goals. It's crazy, right? People are like, and I have a good friend who's an Uber Active Angel, or I'm sorry, it's not an Uber Active Angel anymore, but because all angels kind of go in and out of liquidity, right? But he and I'll be text messaging at the end of the year, like, hey, how many books are you going to read this year? Hey, how many miles are you going to ride this year? Hey, how many, right? And it's not competitive, it's super supportive. And I have a few friends like that are good at that particular type of stuff. And I have a few friends who are great acquaintances, and I would love to see them, but I know that I'm probably not, and I'm just going to set their expectation accordingly. But yeah, writing it down, like if it, you know, I go back to the stuff we heard when it was early in our careers, right? If you don't write it down, it's not a goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. Well, cool. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Parker, and you'll be hearing more from us. All right, we're bringing up Anne from Mindspan. Anne, get ready, unmute, and so good to hear and see you. And you have some a quick question for Dave here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good to see you both. I've really enjoyed this. Congratulations, really to both of you. It's always great. I'm always cheering for you both.
Thank you.
My question, Dave. So when you're writing the book, often when you do so, you have a learning, or you uncover something that, even though it might not have been expressed, it might have been something you knew all along. Was there anything that surprised you?
Yeah, there's actually a number of them. And great question. One is that, so I think of myself as I'm a quick study, but there's things I don't want to spend time learning. Like, I know that PVC pipe thing that's under your kitchen sink, I know I could figure it out, but it just frustrates the hell out of me. So when I have a plumbing problem, I call a plumber. So the whole publishing thing was like, oh my God, I could learn this. But I was like, that is not worth my time. So I negotiated with two different publishers. I ended up picking the publisher that used to be the boss of the publisher I said no to, which was Wiley. And I picked a publisher named Ben Bella Books, and Matt Holt is the publisher. So knowing what I know now, would I pick the same publisher? Yes. Knowing what I know now, will I self-publish the next book? Great question. Because the publisher's role is really to be your investor and to be your marketing company. And the jury's still out if they're really either good at one of those or the other. And then there's like a gazillion 1099 contractors who make all of this stuff work, right? So I go into a studio in a house in West Seattle to record the book for 4 5-hour blocks, right? So I know you can read the book technically in 20 hours. That's what it takes. But that's with all the mistakes I made. So the actual edited version of the book is 8.5 hours, which is, if at twice speed, you can get it done in 4 hours and 15 minutes. So the point of that is that there's a whole bunch of contractors that make it work, and you have to know the people to make it work, or you have to find them on Fiverr or something similar. So the publishing industry was super frustrating, and a friend of mine came from the industry, was like, I'm like venting with him about how frustrating, and she's like, oh my God, do not start a publishing. Money there is the point, right? Which is very meta in my whole scheme of things. So the whole publishing industry was an aha, lots of learning, but lots of like, ooh, don't want to go there. Ooh, that's a great way to not make any money. Is there a problem there? Oh my gosh, yes. Is there a problem you can make money with? No. The other thing that was a big aha was, I've totally been stalking a guy on the web for years and years. His name is Dave Burkus. He wrote about a concept called the Burkus method. And so I get about 3,000 to 5,000 people who read my. If I write, I get 5,000 readers a month. If I don't write, I get 3,000 readers a month. I probably get 3 comments a month on my blog. So if you comment twice on my blog, I totally know who you are. You're my super fan. Like, I love you, right? So I've been doing the same thing with Dave, right? So I super fan Dave, reached out to him at one point and said, hey, I've been kind of an internet stalker for years. I love your stuff. I quoted you in the book because I found out that a mentor of mine quoted him at some point, but I didn't know who it was. And it's in one of the quotes to the chapter headings. It says, where there's mystery, there's margin. So like in Chad's business, there's a shit ton of mystery there, right? So where there's mystery, there's margin. And where there's no mystery, by the way, there's no margin. Like, how much does it cost to buy, what's the wholesale price of a Chevrolet truck? There's no mystery there, right? So Dave's quote was, where there's mystery, there's margin. So I reached out to Dave and said, hey, I've been using your quote for years. It's one of my favorites. And I wrote about the Burkus method in the book. Can I send you a copy of the book and maybe get you to write a blurb for the cover? And so now I have never met Dave, right? I just fanboyed him. That's all I did, or fangirled him in other people's case, right? Sent him the note. He responded with, yeah, send me a copy of the book. I sent him the book. He replied back in a week and said, usually I just skim these and write a blurb. He said, I read your book cover to cover. Loved it. It's going to be the handbook for startup founders. I'm like, what? I read this to my wife with a blurb, right? I'm like, all I did was I fanboyed him. That's all I did. And I asked him to write a blurb and he said yes.
Oh, that's
So
great.
if you don't ask for help, you won't get it. But if you do ask for help, people want to help you. Like, we want you to win.
Mm-hmm.
I want Chad to change the way that people are able to take care of their prescriptions. I want to help. But if you don't ask, nobody knows. And I think that was, go back to my therapy comment earlier, right? I spent the first 41 years of my life not needing help from anybody. It took me some while in therapy to go like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm going to ask for help. It's crazy. So good reinforcement for me of like, go ask and you'll be surprised. Steve Case was my board chair. So I went back to Steve and said, hey, Steve, would you write a blurb for the back cover? And I went back to Brad Feld and said, hey, Brad, would you write the foreword? Right. And so there's an amazing group of people who I absolutely adore who are all quoted on the blurbs for the book, which I love. So that part's super fun.
And that's actually, yeah, that's wonderful. Are you talking the Berkonomics?
Yeah.
Book?
Yeah. Berkus is his name, and Berkonomics is the books that he's written. But he wrote an early on an analysis 20 years ago, actually, about how do you value a pre-revenue company? And he was one of the super early, super angel investors.
That book just arrived today to my
house.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome. I just ordered it. That's right.
Whoa.
Great. Yours is going to be the next.
Well, Amazon will deliver it the next day, and the Audible version will be out in May. So please do buy it. I would really appreciate it. I actually hit 44 on the Amazon list the other day, and I got ahead of Brad Feld. So I tweeted out a photo of it and to Brad that said, hey, I'm finally in front of you.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Anne. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
All right. And the last question I think we will take here is we're going to bring up Gary again. Good to see you again there, Gary. And this is going to be for both of you. Chad, I want you to answer first. So we're going to give Gary here the floor. Gary, shoot.
Yeah, no, that's perfect because that's exactly where I wanted to go. Like, Chad, what has been your experience at being a founder of what you're up to? Like, have you been playing to your strengths? Have you been trying to do it all? And then that will turn into going to Dave.
Yeah, thank you. For me, the last 2 months have probably been some of the most time-consuming phases for me in the last decade, because I had 3 different businesses going on at the same time that I had to transition away from to make the decision to focus on TipaScript full time. And so figuring out how to transition away from the other 2 businesses, one which is the breadwinner, the lucrative part of taking care of my family and whatever else, to then go ahead and make this other leap. Last week was my very last week facilitating leadership development sessions for Molson Coors, right? And when it got to the point where making money in my breadwinning, leading business was getting in the way of me being able to focus on TipaScript, that's where I had to make a decision and say, I can't do all this. I won't be sane to try to keep this up and try to focus on building a business and do the social impact company. And have a family. I just can't do it. And so I had to just make the decision to put the stake in the ground and say, Molson Coors, this is my last month. I've got to transition, onboard someone else. It's been great. And then also onboarding new people for the coffee company lead operations. I'll stay on as an equity partner and advisor, but to step away from any operations there, and allowing them to make mistakes as they're coming in has kind of been a challenge, but it's a part of the process. It's worth it. So definitely for me, as far as the transition with the TipaScript and trying to do everything by myself, I'm getting to the point now where I'm having to interview and hire a technical co-founder to come on board now. So I've gotten the 100K investment, and now I've got funds to say, hey, let's bring somebody on. I'll be looking at, I've got some offers for seed capital, so I can go ahead, and have runway of, 15 months. Dave says we're wrong, right? But at least we'll have some extra runway, more than just a few months. So for me, yeah, it's moving away from being a fee for service, team of me to now building a team. We just converted to a C Corp, which is big. I signed the papers on Friday. So that's a big thing, kind of celebrating the milestones. And I've got to build a team now. And so for me, that's going to be a major shift for me as well, being a solopreneur to now building a team, organization, and growing. So I had to let the other things go in order for me to be heads in with where I am now.
Great job.
Thanks.
Yeah, I love it. So I don't think there's such a thing as work-life balance when it comes to being an early-stage startup founder, because I just know you'll be successful at it. I think you're going to be OCD about just about everything. I look at my career now, Gary, and go, I'm a generalist. The reason I'm a generalist is I had to learn all the stuff to do that I couldn't afford to hire anybody to do. So can I code? Yeah, but I'm not fast. Can I do finance and accounting? Yeah, but I kind of hate it. Am I good at product? Oh, damn, I'm good at product. Like, I am really good at product, right? So do I know how to do financial modeling? Yeah, I'm super competent. Did I ever study that in college? Oh, no. Like, so I'm a dabbler, right? I can hire anybody who's more effective at me at any one role. So now the question will be, which role does Chad have to hire next, right? Because it'll be technical first, and you're like, interim CFO, sure. Right? So there's all those things you're pulling because you're always doing the stuff that you can't hire to have done. Now, the caveat to that is if you're a non-technical co-founder and you've been looking for a technical co-founder for a year and you can't sell them, learn to damn code. Because in the time you spent looking for a technical co-founder, you could have learned to do it using no-code tech. Like, if you're going to let stuff get in your way, right, then you'll never have a successful startup. If you're going to find a way, then you will have a successful startup. But I will tell you, the balance perspective is, my world is split in. I'm not in 6-minute increments like a lawyer, but if you looked at my calendar for today, there were 7 different projects on it, all of which that matter. Like, we're raising a grant for WTIA to roll out programming to underrepresented founders and women who have been historically underserved and disenfranchised. And we're trying to create the mechanics and the cash for them to validate their idea and get a path to funding. Well, I'd rather spend my entire freaking day on that, right? And then build a program we can roll out in other states. I can't spend my whole day on it, but I will get it done, right? Will it work or not? No, we'll pivot around. We'll figure it out how to make it work, right? But I've already scaled programming before, so I know how to do that. But there's no work-life balance with that. I'm on the phone with you guys at 8 o'clock at night because it matters, right? Which is Nick asked. I do it.
That's so great. So if I can dig into that just a little bit, Dave, so founders can find themselves stretched, right? And really just trying to do it all. They're fixing a printer, they're doing everything, right? Like they're doing every bit. And there's the strengths that they've got. So I heard you say earlier, hey, like when it came up against like publishing, yeah, I could do that. But I know I'm just going to go offload that. I'm going to make sure that the experts take care of me there.
Yep.
What would you say to startup founders that are in that same spot? Like, how do you make that determination? Like, you're in the weeds doing something you shouldn't be doing, and really, hey, focus on your strengths.
The first thing is, if there's anything you're doing today that's on your task list that somebody on Fiverr could do, oh my God, give it to somebody on Fiverr for $25. Like, don't step over dollars to find dimes, right? So, but it requires you to be proactive, right? You can't be reactive to it. If you're reactive, that's why you have to turn the email client off and look at it twice a day if that's what's required, right? So I look at my project list at the beginning of the week. I'm like, what are these things that I can outsource to somebody else? So I have to build a list. I can hire somebody on Fiverr to go build me a list for a couple $100 for less, right? That is a great use of my time because my bill rate is much higher than a couple $100 when I'm billing, to Chad's point, right? So, but you can't do it reactively. That's why planning and calendar blocking and all those things matter so much. Like if you're going to run a triathlon or an Ironman, you can't be like, oh, I kind of cut the, the swimming part. I didn't really like double down on that one, right? It'll show. So the same thing is true. There's things you can outsource and things you can't. So, but yeah, I'm a huge fan of Fiverr for that reason. I'm a huge fan of but I'm also a huge fan of paying people for their work, right? I'm not asking people to do stuff for free, especially if they don't have equity or they don't have a title of co-founder. So if you are waiting to find a co-founder or a tech person who will build a product for you for free, when we see you next year at this time, you'll still be talking about the same idea and you will have no trajectory at all. And that will be a bummer.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
All right, everyone. Dave, I think that's these are great things to end on here. And I want to say a few thank yous and a little bit of information before we close up here. But first, Chad, great job. It was a pleasure to have you on, and congrats.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. You'll hear more from us, and we got a lot coming down the line with prime time. So stay strong. But thank you so much. And I'm going to pull you off from the stage.
All right.
Enjoy.
Thanks again, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Chad.
Bye-bye.
All right. And so we, hold on. And Dave, hey man, we got to do just a good hug here, because I am so appreciative of you joining us today, but more importantly, just appreciate you as an advisor and a friend.
Thanks, man. Safe travels. I can't wait to see you when you're back in town again. It's always a good thing to do. And for the folks who came on, thanks for being part of this grand adventure. Like, not just the tools adventure, that's super cool too, but thanks for being part of the adventure. And thanks for, for me, I always tell people, thanks for letting me be part of your entrepreneur journey. And please do go out of your way to invest in people that don't look like you. That would make me super happy. And because there's a lot of people who are just a chapter behind you in the book, and you could help them.
Yeah.
You may not think it right now. You may be like, I can't provide it. No, you can. Like, something that they don't know, and you could be a help.
Well, all right. Thank you. And just a few more. I just want to thank, there's a number of people on here, our internal team, Luis, Kojenwa, Melissa, you all, and Gary are, part of this team that are really driving the Inspired Ones. And thank you all for being a part of this. Everyone else here in the room, thank you for attending. I think, the hotline team, hey, how about this? What was this? I mean, this is a beta test, but it was fun. Awesome. This is awesome. And I think there's a future here. So we're excited to continue to build out the Inspired Ones brand. So we're here every Wednesday evening now, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And we're excited to release our next guests. And hey, we're gonna continue to grow this following. So excited to see it all happen. Thank you all for being here. I'm Nick Hughes from Founders Live. This has been the Inspired Ones. And hey, just stay healthy and stay safe, everyone. Enjoy till next time.